Well, hello, and welcome back to another Congruent True Talks. My name is Andy Verone, and I will be the host for today's episode. Joining me is a dear friend, Steve Jones from Dodge Data. Steve, good morning.
Hello, Andy. How you doing, buddy?
It's good to have you. Good to see you. Appreciate you taking some time with us. Steve, let's start off with just a brief introduction of who you are and what you've been doing. We get a worldwide audience on True Talk, so I'd appreciate you spending some
Yeah,
time. Just
sure, sure. Yeah. I've been in this crazy AEC industry my whole career. I did 5 or 6 years as a design build contractor, and I decided, the build part's the hard part. Where all the trouble is, man. The design part's the fun part. So I just focused fully on design and was with a few different AE firms and ended up as a principal with a real big firm up in the Northeast that then became the main component of Stantec when they came in the US. I still got a bunch of buddies over in the Stantec organization. Um, but I kind of thought, that'll be my career until my phone rang one day and I was invited to come and meet the founders of Primavera because they wanted to do this whole web thing. And a buddy of mine got hired to do that. He knew the tech side, but he said, I know nothing about the business. Why don't you come over and meet them? They'd like to. And I jumped into Primavera and, we did some really fun stuff there, getting that stuff out onto the web. And then I kept bumping into an old buddy of mine who was another recovering architect named Norbert Young at these industry conferences. And he recruited me to come over to what was McGraw Hill Construction at the time, which is now Dodge, to start a research group because, this is the biggest industry on the planet Earth by quite a large measure. But because it's so fragmented, hardly anybody knows what's going on right next door. And so I've just had a lot of fun over the last 20 years now, being able to go out and do this real structured research into all the things going on all over the world and share it in a way that's just neutral and independent. I don't have a dog in a fight. I'm just trying to show you what all your friends and peers are doing that's actually working, and maybe some stuff that is a waste of time for you, or kind of like where you are on a maturity curve and things like that. So it's just been a lot of fun to do these smart market reports.
Yeah, Stephen, and you do a wonderful job of them, and I love your independence and part of True Talks is really driving out truths, right? And sometimes the industry needs it, right? It needs that
Oh yeah, because there's
hard truth.
enough noise and hype to go around, right? Not shiny objects out there.
Exactly. You're our paths have crossed for many years, and
Yeah,
Steve, my background, I, again, started in industry and went to tech for a while, and here we are. So it's been great having a friend and someone that really does have the passion for the industry that you need to cover
yeah.
it. So appreciate that. Steve, today's episode, we're going to double click on the rise of the owner. And I think in my 40-year career now, I think there's an opportunity for the owners to step up. And because the data is so valuable now to them,
Yes, yes.
to really start making some decisions on what they want from their supply chain. What's your thoughts on that, bud? Let's get into what you're seeing from a perspective of the owner, and then let's push out some truths of why it might not happen.
Yeah. It's interesting because from my background and all those years, decades in AE, I mean, the owner was everything, man. The sun rose, the sun set. The owner said jump. You just said how high, and that was it. And then when I came into tech, especially Primavera, it just seemed like, and Meridian and all these companies at the time, it was all about the GC, get the GC, get the GC, the GC. And I'm like, okay. And then the thing which we developed at Primavera was it was cloud-based, but nobody used cloud at that time. It was ASP, right? Application Service Provider. But basically, it was a cloud-based document management system, which would allow you then to do multi-party workflows. You could assign in advance how any document was supposed to go, who was supposed to review it, and get transparency to that process. And it was very cool. Early 2000s, they brought that out. And the people at Primavera were thinking, all right, now how do we get our GC customers who are now using P3 at the time to use this? And I'm going, guys, I think this is something owners are really going to like. Okay, well, we belong to Kurt. Why don't you go start talking to some owners? And lo and behold, boom, we had great success immediately with Intel. They plugged us into every one of their projects all over the world, about $5 billion worth a year. And then J&J followed suit, and they used a consulting firm to sort of build out these workflows and stuff. And they were just rocking and rolling with the thing for about another $5 billion. And then the Primavera sales guys got involved, and one of them got us in with NAVFAC. That was like $10.5 billion. So it ended up that was really what drove it was the owners. And it's been interesting since I've now moved over to Dodge and been doing this research and looking at, all right, how can owners play? The first thing that we looked at tech-wise was BIM. All the way back in 2008, Autodesk had us do the first BIM study in North America. All right, who's using it? What are they using it for? Where are they getting the value? What's working? What's not working? Right? It's kind of a roadmap for everybody else to try and follow to get into. And we would interview the AEs, yes, we'd interview the GCs and all that, and the owners. And the owners were like, "Oh no, this isn't. Oh no, this is for AEs. Oh no, this is for our contractors." And we got to the point actually a couple of years later in 2008, we actually did a standalone deep dive report just into BIM for owners. What's the business value of BIM for owners? Largely because we wanted the US owners to be aware of what was happening in the UK. Because the UK had took 5 years to build out this whole structured framework of what BIM 2.0 is and how to do it, and what to do it, and what tools to use, and all, all that, because they were going to say, all right, any central government funded project, which is like 35 or something percent of the whole industry over there, is going to have to do BIM 2.0. So we got to get you ready for it. And we just wanted people in the US to know the difference, right? And so we were doing studies, comparing the UK owners with the US owners and how many of them were requiring BIM, how many of them had policies about it, and the UK was really into it. The US was tiny little fragments of it. But the job that I have and my team has is to inform and hopefully inspire and then ultimately influence people's behavior to do things in better ways, right? And so, if nothing else, we at least wanted the U.S. owners to know that existed. And then a couple of years later, Renee Tejan from the VA came to us, and she was this lone wolf over there trying to get BIM implemented as a standard at the VA because all those complicated projects that they're doing, the renovations and everything else, really mission critical stuff. And she was beating her head against a wall. So again, she came to us to say, give me some ammo here. And so we did a deep dive study into just what's happening with BIM and how valuable it is on complex projects like healthcare, right? And that's the kind of role that the work that we do serves very well, is it gives somebody ammo. It's, hey, this isn't me. All right, this is a whole bunch of other owners and big GCs doing these complex projects saying this stuff is real and it actually has the value. And we kept rolling after that. And every time we would do one of these studies, we would do Australia, China, Europe, and we did the Middle East, and then we did just a slice for infrastructure, and we did just a slice for water projects. And every time we would also ask owners what was going on. And we began to see that owners were starting to get some of the value, right? And, as you well know, the crazy thing that we're dealing with today is the fact that we were almost kind of too successful in this big first wave of automation technology. In that, okay, now we have very well entrenched set of 10,000 point apps, point solutions that don't talk to anything else. But boy, do they do a great job for Eddie and Sally in that little department. And Eddie and Sally are going to, out of my cold dead hands, are you going to rip my little point solution versus more integrated platforms? That's a whole separate struggle we could talk about another time. Well, what's interesting is that AE side, right, that the Bentleys and the Autodesk were driving, the visualization of that turned out to be really, really interesting to owners. Hey, could I see that BIM again? I got to show these people that BIM again. Show me that BIM again, right? Because they could actually see it now. They could walk through it. It was like magic, and for AEs, that was incredibly valuable because, a lot of people don't understand that architects don't get just paid by the hour endlessly to do a design. No, man, you got a fee that you put in as competitively as any contractor did, and you got a certain amount of money to get the yes. You got to get to yes, right? And boy, did that help getting to yes. Woo, wow. And it would make it stick too. Not like, yeah, we were thinking over the weekend that no. Boom, because they could see it, right? Super powerful stuff. And then we began to see some trends where they were starting to pick up on the value of what the GCs and their kind of point solution stuff around project controls and project management were picking up. Like, hey, this is actually kind of cool. And I got to give a lot of credit to the Antebi brothers. Way back when everybody else was focused on contractors, they came out with eBuilder and said, you know what, we're going to focus on something for owners that they could actually run a whole platform on. And it didn't get a lot of traction early on. McGraw-Hill, my company, is actually one of the first investors in it. But it has really proven out to be a smart place to be, right? It's like, all right, give the owners the ability to actually have transparency to the whole process. Give the owners the ability to write some of this. Because what's interesting when you deal with owners, as I did for 20 years in AE, the larger organizations, these guys running these projects, they largely came from big contractors. They came out of they're not, some VP of administration has suddenly got, hey, you're now in charge of the headquarters. What? You can't hold a blueprint. Know what the right. No, man, these guys are really savvy. They get it. You give them a tool, they're on it. All right. And so that has been a very interesting transition that we've been watching happen up until now, the last 4 or 5 years, where they're now not only is there eBuilder, but of course there's Kahua and Project Mates and just PM Web and all sorts of you guys, and a lot of folks are out there really trying to service that owner, give that owner the ability to have process transparency, which is just a magical thing because it reduces the uncertainty in the whole situation. Because, as every study tells you, people in this industry spend half their time looking for the information of what to do. And so much of the time it's not even right. So all that stuff has really come now to give owners the ability, should they choose to be in a much more powerful place. And we used to do, I don't know, maybe one owner study every few years. We've done 7 in the last 12 months because everybody's realizing now is the time that the owner is going to and is actually taking charge. And the kinds of ways we're seeing that play out is it began early on with just deliverables. Okay, this is the digital deliverable that we want, right? Now it's kind of the UK model too. It wasn't so much on the process. It was but when you finalize either a phase or the project, here's the digital deliverable and the standards for that. It's beginning to now get more into the process itself. And you're seeing a growing number of owners saying, all right, not only am I going to tell you what the digital deliverable is, I'm going to tell you what the multi-party digital project delivery process is going to look like. Right. And the next wave after that, which is beginning to happen, and it's not a majority yet, but none of these trends were majorities when they started, were they? Right. Is oh, you use XYZ for your project management? That's cute. Here's your login to mine. And all your key trades are going to use mine. Right. And so that is interesting in that you can clearly see the benefit to the owner because they're now, every study that we do of them, they're reporting those who can actually get their teams to use theirs. The quality of the data is just magnitudes above getting a chunk of junk dropped on your desk from ABC application at the end of that project and a chunk of junk dropped from some other one, you know. They just really love that, right? Having that quality because that other trend that's coming along and pulling is the digital twin. Right. I need good, clean data to put into these digital twins because now I can see how I can tie capital planning to actual design and construction to decades and decades of really optimizing my management for it. So the tools are there. We're seeing an increasing number of owners taking hold of that and getting in the driver's seat. It ain't everybody yet by any means, right? But again, as with all these things, they will get simpler to use. They will get more comprehensive in terms of their functionality. They'll get to where they can talk to other systems that owners have internally that they need in order to, financial systems and things like that. That will happen, right? You know that well. You're able to drive that, right? That's going to be the way. right? Now that I'm a granddad, I think about what kind of world my grandchildren and Keith Richards are going to have that we're leaving for them. Um, it'll be unrecognizable in terms of the process of where it begins, and it'll almost be like owners can press an easy button and take advantage of what will happen also, which is a whole lot more factory built, modular and offsite construction, right? But the process will just be so much more defined and regular and standardized. We're doing a big owners study now for the folks at the National Institute of Building Sciences, NIBS, because they're in charge of rolling out the BIM standard, right? And they've got the brand new one 4.0 coming out, and they really want to get owners to say, yeah, okay, you're going to do this project for me. You're going to do it with this BIM standard, not whatever you came up with on your own. That's cute and all, but no, this is it, right? And so we're out there right now doing a study of owners across the US to say, all right, you've been generating and collecting this tsunami sea of data for all this time. What are you really doing with it? How valuable is it? How consistent is it? To what degree? Have you ever applied standards to it? Do you see the benefits of having it when it's much more consistent? Yada, yada. And I know we're going to get the big thumbs up stuff on that when it comes through to say, yeah, man, this data standard, please, thank you, right? Let's all get behind that one. And that's all going to push towards basically owners being fully back in the driver's seat on at least the larger ones, the serial owners, the guys who do enough to make a dent.
Steve, a couple
Really
questions.
trying. Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, just let's double click on a couple of these points.
Mhm.
Is it time for the owners to rise because of the complexity of contracts? And how is that helping them avoid risk? I mean, do you think that's part of it? I mean, every project you see today, if it's a complex data center or maybe a biopharma, right, is part of this, I gotta have that transparency because of the complexity or the the contracting, right? The actual risk that's in the contract. What's your thoughts on that?
It's interesting because the traditional contracting, the sort of your design bid build approach to contracting, was all about cascading risk, right? Because the owner could kick everything to the GC tried to kick everything possible they could find under the couch down to the trades tried to kick it down to their suppliers and distributors and everything else. I mean, everybody's trying to kick it down to somebody else. At the end of the day, though, we do a fair amount of work with the sureties and the insurance companies. And we're doing a big project for Liberty Mutual right now just to try and measure the positive impact that tech is having on this. They're all for helping owners to consolidate that risk and go ahead and assume it as long as you can take the damned uncertainty out of the process.
Right.
That's the thing that kills everybody. On paper, this is a simple business. Hey, here's a design. Go build it. I'll move in on Wednesday. No problem with that, right? But it's all that baked in uncertainty, and then there's things that are difficult for anybody to control, like the supply chain. But then again, the supply chain is built on that old model of, well, the architect specs this sink, and then the GC actually has a better deal through the distributor for that sink. And can the architect then look at some paper and approve it? And then we'll do that change and that, as opposed to, oh, I'm buying this kind of nicely sophisticated chunk of a building from factory B over there, and they're being assembled on the job site, and all that. We have just finished a big study for the Department of Energy because they love the energy efficiency of modular buildings, but putting federal money behind it, the labor unions get right up in their face going, you're taking jobs off my job site. What is all that about? And they didn't have any ammo to go back with. And so we just finished this study for them, looking at, all right, the spend, right, the capital money that's getting spent, where is it getting spent? How is it getting spent? Where and what factories are people now building these things? And what's that look like in terms of pay scales? And then the improved safety and the improved environmental impact of all that too. That this is really a net benefit for the whole industry, that kind of thing. But I do believe that owners will increasingly, and the insurance guys and the surety guys that we talk to are behind helping them do that. Just assume more of it right at the center frankly where it belongs instead of being, having attorneys kick it down stream to everybody else who can barely handle it. Let's keep it where it belongs, right? With the owner. Hey, I'm putting my capital at risk to build this new factory or whatever it is. I'll assume the risk because I now have a platform that I can see and control. I can run what the process is supposed to look like when you do it for me, right? And I'm much more comfortable doing it because I get much more reliable results than I ever did. I think that contracting world is going to simplify and
Right.
consolidate. I mean, those of us, like you and I have talked about over the years, have been expecting that there would be a great deal more consolidation among the service providers. There'd be fewer bigger AEs. And they may even be melding with the CMs, right? And that the CMs would be becoming much more dominant and almost like owners reps, and that there'd be fewer bigger trades. And frankly, for an awful lot of work, people would just hire a trade to do it because they're the ones turning the wrench anyway at the end of the day. I don't need a bunch of guys in a trailer moving paper around all day. And that necessarily hasn't happened. Okay. We still have a pretty highly fragmented set of companies providing this. Um, I don't know whether or not this simplified contracting may help to do that. There's some of this stuff is generational, as you know, right? If I'm a guy in my 50s and I got to where I am by making sure I bid the heck out of everything, get the low bidder, and my shareholder value and all that, okay, you're as I say with anything innovative in this industry, everybody wants to be first to be third.
Right.
Okay, you try it, totally bollocks it up, right? Get somebody else in there to figure out what you did wrong. Hey, call me, baby. I'm all in. But until then, I'm doing it the old tried and true way. Yeah, it could be better. Yeah, it's probably a little burnt around the edges, but hey, it gets it done, right? Okay, so I mean, kind of got to get those people off to Florida. And what we're seeing now is an awful lot of the, especially like in the VDC groups, they're now people in their 20s and 30s and early 40s, and they really are ready to try different processes. And they're open to almost anything, right? They're not bringing so much of that baggage of the old ways of doing things have to be the best ways of doing things. So some of this is going to be generational. I mean, this is a people business at the end of the day. As much tech as we want to throw at it, it ends up being a people business, right? I think we may begin to see some company structure changes and some player changes, and especially as we get more of these offsite and factory built type manufacturers playing in there. What's that going to do to the whole supply chain and everything else? So there's a lot of interesting stuff that's going to be happening in the next 10 years.
Yeah, see, it's really good. I think for me, and I just smile because you and I are kind of the same generation. I think back into my early days, the art of the change order, right? I mean, that's what you did, right? You
That's
signed a
right.
contract and you were so happy when you had your first change order, approved. So,
That's
like I
right.
said,
And you got it on a fax machine.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. We'll see if that changes. But Steve, I think for me, I'm like you, fascinated with the technologies that are out there. But at the same time, I think cost is so important to all of those models, right? Even in the earliest days of building information management, and if cost was that one dimension that was kind of always left on the side, right? It was you think about, you said it this morning, beautiful visualizations. I need to see that again. Pull it up. You got to have that cost dimension in there as well. Because by the way, the pretty picture comes with a cost, right?
Of course, yes.
So I'm super
Yeah,
excited about, what we're doing from empowering the owner with that visibility on cost and change, most importantly, the change aspect of it. So I think once we see those coming together, again, like you said, more platform based, it doesn't have to be everyone. One company doesn't have to own the platform. You just have to be plugged into the platform. You got to be
that's
a
right. Yes. Yes. It's like any kind of cloud
vessel to the
application. You
platform.
just want to have access to it. You don't have to own squat. No, you just want to be a player at the table.
One thing that just to me, it's I had my year anniversary a few weeks ago here at Contribuent. The thing that, and you said it earlier, like our business, if you look at our business in the UK, right, we've worked on some amazing projects, London Underground, HS2, National Highways. But it went back to your point. It was owner-driven standards, right?
Yeah.
What why haven't we seen that more in the US? Why haven't we seen the government agencies say, you shall use these techniques? I'm like, we can leave technology by the side. These programs, these people, process, and technologies to drive more efficiency. What's your thought? I'm puzzled by it because I think if I look at my business in Australia, New Zealand, or even in you know Europe, even in South America, there seems to be more standardization around what we do. In the US,
Mhm.
it's just wide open.
Yeah, I think some of this has to do with fear of owning the problem means that then you are liable for it. Now, it was part of the pushback that we saw from owners very early on in BIM. If I mandate it, if I tell people they have to use BIM, if they don't have licenses, I got to pay for their licenses. If they don't have training, I got to pay for their training. If they kind of mess it up and it doesn't work as well as it should, which it never does the first time, I kind of own that problem. And that whole thing we just talked about in terms of, oh no, any kind of risk, it smells like risk, I'm pushing it down, right? And that headset has to change. But the only thing that is going to change that headset is comfort and more certainty, right? And I think that the kind of the trend that we're seeing is that as transparency to a process increases, certainty increases and comfort increases, right? But they kind of have to go with each other. And then, what our job is to go out and collect what the best things that are happening and then get that out there in our neutral format in front of people so they can see. They don't have to wait till it happens on their project to trust it. They can say, well, here's 50 other, 100 other people that look a lot like me. A lot of them are having this good success. I can trust this going forward, but it's the the problem we face is that the downsides are pretty big, right? If your company is counting on you to get that plant done because you need to have those, whatever the units are that you got to produce next year, and there's a problem and you don't get that plant done because you tried to do something cool and different and new, oy, that's not good for your career. I remember back in my days when I used to go to a lot of CURT meetings, and that's the organization of the big owners, and I was having I was back there evangelizing all this tech stuff, and became good friends with one of these guys. He was a top, yeah, I'll call him a Fortune 50 company, okay? And he goes, Steve, listen, I can see a door at the end of the corridor I got to get to. As I'm moving down that corridor, a rabid Wolverine can come out of a side door anytime and attack me. And as long as I got my feet on the ground, I think I know how to deal with it. But now you want to get me on some jet-propelled rocket spaceship thing to go down that hallway. And I don't have that trust anymore. You're adding to my risk. And I went, wow, here we are all thinking that, oh no, look, we're going to reduce your risk. But the implementation of that in an organization that's used to doing things a certain way, that actually adds risk. And so an awful lot of what we're trying to focus on now and help people understand is, okay, here's this thing. How do I actually do it in my organization? Right? What's that toolkit? What's that how-to manual look like? Do I pilot it? Do I pilot it in parallel with traditional processes so I can make sure and then that yes, that's an additional. It's that. How do I actually make that change and drive that change management process within my organization? I think that's something that has been a little bit neglected in the shiny object glamour of bringing in new technology. It's all right, how do I actually do this thing in my org? And so we're trying to put some focus on that in some of the studies that we're doing. What looks like the right successful process for doing that? Because I think that's what a lot of people would like to change, but they're afraid of effing up because if they F up, it's on them.
Change management aspect of that is huge, right? I think that I try to coach up my team every day because it's easy to put benefits analysis together. It's
Oh, oh
benefits
yeah. In a
realization, but
perfect world.
exactly because there's so many factors in that. I mean, by the way, just the adoption rate. And so things I like to do is, now that you're on system, how many workflows have you produced? How many change orders have you actually automated, right? Those are little things, but back to your comment on change, that helps because it makes it believable. right? It's
Yes.
actually
It's
working.
real, it's
Exactly.
tangible. Yes.
Steve, listen, we're running up here on the top of the hour.
Okay.
I do want, so three things for me, in a couple sentences. State of U.S. infrastructure. A lot of money was earmarked. Where do you see that? But are we going full speed into investing in the U.S. infrastructure? Is that money still turning colors and getting down to projects? What's your personal opinion on that?
Yeah, we track, we use a graphic like the United Fund with the thermometer, right? Across the five different types of projects that it's earmarked for in terms of how much has actually been released. And we're like, big picture kind of halfway through releasing those funds. And if any of you guys drive around a lot, I mean, you see this stuff is at work in places. I mean, I live in New York City, and it's at work in New York City, as well as other places that I go. So, yes, it is happening. The reality of life is that even that amount of huge money wasn't enough to take care of the actual infrastructure problem that we have here. So it's not as if that's going to be a one and done. It's very important to get that going, but unfortunately, we're going to have to keep investing pretty significantly in things just to even keep up with where certain other countries are. And I was, just in terms of like rail, right? I was in Japan recently, and it just makes you ashamed, when you see how just completely, totally together that is, in other parts of the world, they've prioritized it more. It was more important to them all along. And so there you have it. But I think right now we're seeing a reasonable amount of flow. When we do our economic forecast projections for each one of the sectors in the economy, infrastructure is still a really smart place to be if you can get in that space, because there's going to be plenty of business, and it's good business. They're nice long-term projects. And so it's going to continue to be robust, but we are showing it tailing off when that 5-year funding wraps. And so somewhere we're going to have to be able to keep affording to invest in it, because it's not going to, it doesn't fix the problem.
Yeah, but to your point, my 20-year-old daughter spent 6 or 7 weeks in Italy studying abroad, and her first feedback to me was, "Why don't we have trains in the U.S.?" But she
I
took
know.
trains everywhere. Just anywhere she
I
wanted to
know.
go. It's a good
This is
point.
what you do. Yeah.
Yeah, Steve, I want to have you back, early 2025, because I do want to go deep on modular and offsite, something that I did a lot of studying on. The pandemic actually really slowed that. There was some amazing progress before the
Yeah.
pandemic on offsite and modular. And then the supply chain just kind of put that on the back.
Ooh,
I know you're excited about it. So listen, we'll definitely we'll have a
good.
session on that. And thirdly, just thank you, bud. Thank you for your
Oh
time
yeah.
today. As always, I could sit here and listen to you all day,
Oh,
but
I know. We're like a couple old geezers on the front porch. We could go on for days.
exactly. All right. So for the audience, it's a huge thank you out to Steve Jones from Dodge Data. Please continue this conversation on our social channels. We'll get this out there. We'll get this posted. Please ask questions. Steve and I will monitor that, and we'll answer your questions as we see fit. And then also, Steve and I will turn this into a blog that we'll co-author, and you guys can again continue the conversation once we get that published. Steve, have a great day. Thank you, my friend. We'll talk soon.
Bye-bye.